In this tutorial, I'm walking through how to allow a player to customize the colors of their character. I'll walk through some of the UI of color sliders, how to create them, how to use them, and how to assign those colors that they choose, they create, that they make to the actual character that they are going to be, well, playing with throughout the game. All of the code and all of the assets are actually in the description, so linked below me they should be. They're all public domain or CC0, all are free to use. And yeah, let's get going on making some really awesome color customization player feature stuff. Here we are in Unity. Let's go ahead and get started. So project name, I'm always creative with these. Color video demo is perfect. And 2D, definitely 2D. Let's hit create and get Unity loaded. Quapow. All right, first things first, let's take a look at what we have under UI, because we're gonna need a canvas. I like to have that canvas scaled to the camera, screen space to camera, and let's drag main camera over and boop. And let's make sure everything is going to fit. So scale of screen size, and let's do 1920 by 1080. That's looking good. And then let's go ahead and get our sprites loaded next. I already have them. Keep in mind, my sprites are public domain, Creative Commons 0, so they are linked in the description for you to use and have. I should have them up back here somewhere. I opened mine. And yes, our beautiful color bar, there they are. Color bar is background and fancy unicorn. Again, if you want to use these, they're all in the description. Let's go ahead and open this folder to keep organized and drag these guys in. Bloop. There we are. Won't need that, and bam. And now let's add a background to our canvas as a image. Kind of a fun desert background we got here. Itsy bitsy. And we're just going to pump it up to match our size, 1920, 1080. Although I think that looks a bit stretched. Game, yeah. So it looks a bit stretched, so we're gonna, 1200 maybe, and just a little over so there's no border on it. And beautiful, 1250 is what I'm gonna settle on there. And gotta get this renamed so we know what it is. Background is good. And let's drag in our player and get this renamed. So this will be the object that we are allowing the user to customize to add the color to our fancy unicorn. My unicorn, I'm pretty sure is named Fred. I'm not sure what yours is named, but pretty sure it's Fred. And I'm going to pump up the size on this. That way the user or the player can see it more easily. Let's get Fred in the desert. Fred likes the desert. He can find water easy. I don't know how. Don't judge me. So what we're going to be using are these color bars. The reason that I'm using images or sprites for the sliders is creating a gradient was frustrating and time consuming. So especially if you're just starting out, if you want something simple, please use the color bars I've created. Again, they're linked in the description. Here is my first slider. Let's get this positioned. 400 by 150. I'm going to leave it here in a way so we can space it out. Each slider will be about 100, and it will be 150 apart. All right, we're going to use 0 to 1 because Unity's color spectrum is 0 to 1. You can use 255. It gets a bit confusing with the math in the script. And so the right side is completely black. Let's go ahead and flip this right to left. And that way, when they pull it all the way to the right of the slider, that will be the portion that is black, which would be 0, right, on the 0 to 1 scale or on the 0 to 255 scale. And that's our starting number for now. Our starting int is 0. Well, a float. It's a float. And let's get this renamed. Red slider would make sense. And let's go ahead and add in that background. Bam. Now notice how it's completely white on one side. Let's take care of that. And let's put this as a gradient so the user can see where they are at to some degree, but I don't want it to entirely obfuscate, we entirely interrupt their view of the color. And so this is totally up to you. Looks like yeah, I'm going to 0.184 or so. This is looking awesome. Hi, Fred. Or should it be Hank? He kind of looks like a Hank. All right, so at this point, let's go ahead and get that script to the player added. The script to the player, there's not a ton. So let's get it all organized first. And C# script, there it is. And to be clear about this, again, I'm creative with naming. Let's name it, or I'll name mine, player script. All the code is also linked in the description, of course. Select player, and I'm going to drag this over. And let's see it. Open. We need to organize a bit. We won't need all these components. Let's zoom in so you can see. Let me just get rid of these comments. For the player script, honestly, there's not much we're going to have to do for this type of an application. We'd build out the player to move around and use, but right now we're just interacting with the sprite and the colors of it. So for now, what we'll need here is I'm going to delete the start and update. We want a function where we get the actual color, and then one where we set the color. So let me get those in and I'll explain a bit more. So this literally grabs the component, the sprite renderer, and which is, and oh, it went all okay. Sure. Right here, our sprite renderer, and then it's going to grab the color attribute and return it. So we know what color the character currently is. Now we need another. And new color is actually going to be the parameter, which I should put up here. There we are. And so now we have a way to access the color, and notice these are public. Get and set, by the way, are common throughout computer science. It's a way to tell people, hey, this is grabbing something from this class, from this method, and this is, well, getting something. With player done, really, that's all we need. Let's save, and let's add a bit of code to the slider now. Go back into scripts, and I'm just going to call this slider script because I am creative. I'm just going to shrink this down so we can see. All I'm doing is dragging and dropping. And let's open this up. All right. So what we're going to need is we want an on-click listener, except not non-click listener. Confusing, huh? Let's go ahead and make sure that we grab the slider aspect of this on start, right? Because it is a game object, we want to use the slider. We're going to be using this script on 3 different sliders, the red, the green, and the blue. So we want to keep that in mind and make sure it's universal or applicable to all 3. So and in start, we're going to set that equal to the slider component, right? Which is, here's our red slider, and the slider component's literally this part, because that's what we're going to be manipulating and needing info from, right? And then with that in mind, we also need to add that, well, listener, kind of a listener. This is, if you poke around, this is pretty much right off Unity's website. And this is perfect, and it's red because it does not exist yet. So what I'm going to do, honestly, I'm just going to copy this, click on update. We don't need update, so goodbye. And now we have a function. We do want this function, let's go ahead and make it public. And 2 things are going to happen here. First, let's go ahead and get the value of the slider. And let's debug just to test this. That's looking good. I'm going to hit save. And then like I said, let's try it out. Click and click. And let me hit run. Let's take a look at the console here. And this is looking good. No errors. We're getting numbers. That is exactly what we want to see. We don't need game to be free aspect. We're doing 16 by 9. Perfect. Let me clear that out. So we're getting those colors, but nothing is changing yet. Well, that's our next step. Let's head back over here to some code. So how we're going to make the player's color change, we don't want to keep all of the script, all of the tools within the player script itself to be manipulating the colors, right? That would be part of a beginning stage where you select your player, things of that nature. So we will want a separate script for that. For that, I'll just go over here. We could call it Scene Manager. We could call it Color Manager. Anything like that's awesome. I'm just going to name mine Scene Manager. You could do Game Manager. And then like I was saying, I'm going to create a script and I'll say scene script. And this is going to handle some of the communication between the user interface and that of the player class as well. So we got that added. Let's go back to our scene manager and let's go ahead and drop the scene script here. With that all opened up, we're going to want a few things here. We do want access to the player, and we're also going to want access to the player script. So just to make life easier, and we can actually have that one be private. And then we're going to need to keep track of the colors of the player. And these are done in floats. So we're just going to keep an array of floats. That way we can easily convert it to an actual number object and apply it to the player. So this is where we'll keep track of those colors for the player, where the player will know what color they are because it is assigned in their sprite render, but they don't need to keep these floats hanging around. So when the game starts up, we want to know what color the player currently is, so we can make sure it's accurate as the player or as the user starts dragging around those color options and changing things. We don't want it to magically suddenly be 100% blue if they move the blue bar over just a little smidge. So let's do under start. Start color. We're going to hold off on this, actually. We do need to declare a color here, but I'm going to comment that out for now. Go back to that in a sec. Color 0 is going to equal, and what it's going to equal is the start color. And where that start color is coming from, and again, we're going to do this, I'm just going to copy, paste, and paste. This looks a bit weird, but where these colors are coming from are the actual user. So that being said, we're now going to need a way to get those colors from the user. Well, lucky for us, we already have it, right? Color dot start color is going to be equal to. So we grab that color from the player. Now that we have that color, we're going to grab the red, green, and blue and assign them to 0, 1, and 2. There we are. And so now we've established this is going to convert them, grabbing R's in a float. And so we're getting floats. And the colors will be between 0 and 1, 1 being the max amount. And now that we have those colors at the start, we also want a way for this, since this will be keep track of the floats for those colors, we want this to be able to send to the player any updates that take place. So we don't need an update, we need a, let's just, we're going to need a function to do this. So what this is doing is the RGB index and the float value that has changed. This is where the slider comes back in. The slider calls this. So we're going to have the slider call this. It's going to pass to itself. It's going to pass an RGB index, red, green, blue index, and then the float of the adjustment. The float is the number that has been adjusted here. When the player drags this or the user moves this, the number is going to be corresponding to that. So if we look at our slider here, right, that's 0.5, this is 0.1, it's way over here, so on and so forth. And remember, I flipped this to make the darker side go this direction. Okay, and so that float is going to be the number that gets returned when this is adjusted. And the index of red is going to be used up here. And if I want, I mean, I can default this to 0, sure. But this is what's going to be used to identify the differences between the sliders. So I have a red slider here, and now I can assign its index is going to be 0. But when I make a blue slider, its index can be 1. We'll notice, if we go back over here to our scene script, red is at the 0 index. Blue right here, this is the 1 index. And green is the 2 index. So this will all work out very, very nicely. What we'll do then is finishing this off, colors, RGB. So color float is the float that's being passed, right? So we move the red bar and the red bar is now equal to 0.4. What we're going to have happen then is inside of this, we're not going to run this debug. We will run this function here, change color, and we'll give it, well, 0 for red and the float of 0.4 because that's not what it's at. And then we would want to use that information to, well, colors dot whatever index. Okay, the red index has been changed. Now we're going to go ahead and pass that to the player. So that would be and I could have also done, it might be more clear if I do a different variable here, right? Because what this really is something like, this might be more obvious. There we are. So I'm creating a new color from these floats, and then I'm passing it down here. Player script, set color. Okay. We need to make sure that we declare what player script is, and I'm going to do that up here in start. I'm just going to say, obviously I could have made it public and done it in Inspector as well, but there's multiple ways to do everything in Unity, so why not? Okay, this is looking really good. Let's take a second look at that slider and make sure we call, make sure we have access to this change player color. So we're going to need to add some stuff for this for sure, such as, let's get the scene manager script. Right here. And then and this way we can do it on start, and now we have the scene script. Then, like I was saying down here, we can run and this is looking nice. So let's walk through this. I'll get rid of this comment now. What's going to happen? Well, I click on the red slider and I make a change. Value change check. It's going to call the scene script. In the scene script, change color. What's going to be passed? The RGB index, which is right here. It's this index value. So for red, it is 0. And we can change that in inspect for blue and green. And then a color float. So whatever I change the slider to, it then makes this new color and passes it to the player script, which is here, and set the color. Boom. All right, let's make sure we save all of this. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. Zoop. And here we are. Boom. Great. And let's make sure, so we have our scene manager and we need a player object there. Drop that right in. It is odd though, where's the player script? Let's just double check. Did we start color, scene script, player script? Player script's here. And then where do we get it? We get it right here. We could make that, oh, but we're using it first. Okay, so here's a mistake. I have player script and I have it right here and I'm calling a function. If I can do this, but I would need to make sure I define player script. I just did Control X, which is cut, and Control C up here. So now I have player script defined, then I use it. Or I could have had it set as public. You just need to make sure to have it above this. Let's go ahead and hit save again. Yep, that is great. Zoop and zoop. And that is still set. All right, let's try. Zoop, 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 zoop. This is great. Let's make sure to set our defaults to 0 though, so we have no interference from other colors. So I'm going to go ahead and do 0, 0, end off this color, and just comment the rest out, just for testing purposes. Save, back here, and play. Boom! And there we are, red. Rah, 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 rah. Perfect. So red is fully working, and now we want to get on to those other colors. Okay, so what I'm going to do real quick is duplicate red slider twice, make it green, and separate them out. I'll then throw images on them. I'm separating them each by 150, so 0 for green, and then -150 for blue. The blue index will be 2 in our float array, and green will be 1. Now let's go over to our sprites. Are red, green, and blue. I'm really liking the look of this. Now let's go back over here to the code. And the main thing we're going to actually want to do here is, well, here. We want to get these colors back in place because we want all of our colors to be working. And then we could also set it up to always be a particular color on start. But first, let's try all this. Save. So all I did was uncomment that, and let's hit run. And nothing but zoop, zoop, and zoop. And all of these appear to be working like we would expect. Depending on how you want to do these, I've had these flipped either way. I kind of like it with the white at the end and the black, right? Because if we all go this way, the object does turn black. But it's kind of, well, it's up to you how you would like them flipped. Also, the default values, I've messed around with a bunch of different ones. But here we are, we have a fully functioning color selection system here that we can have stored in our sprite and use throughout a game, this game, mini games, allowing player customization, which is critical important. So this can be just added to any character creation scene. And look out for another tutorial that I might be doing soon on having maybe the different elements of a sprite. Maybe I'll take the horn and the tail and all of that and creating each color and then storing that within the player script and having that as your player throughout the game. So color and sprite costume manipulation and then storing it. Right? But regardless, this is a critical aspect of character customization. I'd love to hear about your own personal projects. Make sure to hit like, make sure to hit subscribe, and yeah, tell me about the awesome stuff you are making in the comments or good jokes or whatever. But